In this video, we're going to look at querying records using aggregate functions. So aggregate functions allow us to return values based on some calculation. So we're familiar with a lot of these aggregate functions, such as average, max, min, sum. Count might be less familiar, but count is basically going to just return the number of rows. Mod is going to perform modular arithmetic, which basically means it's going to divide a value by another value, and whatever the remainder is, that's what the value that we're going to be left with. So for example, if we were asked to show the total number of order lines associated with order ID number 4, we'd say select count star from order line where order ID equals 4. So here we are back at the server. I've copied this query over. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And we can see that 4 rows were returned. If I were to remove the count function and run this, we would see that there were 4 rows that were returned. The next thing we're going to look at when querying records are scalar functions, which allow us to return values based on the input value. So it basically allows us to manipulate what that value is going to look like. So for example, if I wanted to return the field in complete uppercase, I'd say upper, or if I wanted to have it in all lowercase, I'd say lower. Length would return the total number of characters in a field. Mid would return the characters between a starting character and an ending character that I specify. Round would take a number and round it to a certain number of decimal places. And trim would remove any spaces that are before or after the particular string that I'm looking at. So for example, if I wanted to see all customer names where each word was capitalized, I'd say select upper name from customer. So here we are back at the server. I've pasted this query. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and you can see that it capitalizes all the customer names. If you're interested in additional scalar functions, you can click the link in the top right corner to learn more about them. The next thing we're going to look at when querying records are date functions. Date functions return date values. So for example, if I wanted to just see the current system date and time, I'd use now. If I want to just see the current date, I say cur date. If I want to see the current time, I say cur time. If I want to extract a date part from a date time expression, I could use the date command. If I wanted to convert a string that is not in my SQL date format, I can use string to date. So for example, if I wanted to show today's date, I could say select cur date from dual. Now dual is the system. It's not actually pulling from the actual table, it's pulling from the system. So cur date is not associated with any table, it's associated with the time right now that is on that system. In MySQL, you don't need to include from dual. You could just say select cur date, but I include from dual here because other environments such as Oracle require that you use from dual when selecting information like this. Now let's say I wanted to convert a non-MySQL date to a MySQL date, such as this one where it's the day first, so 5th of March 2019. If I wanted to convert that to be MySQL format, I could say select string to date and then provide the date string and then the format that that date string is in. So this is indicating that the 5 represents the day, the 3 represents the month, and the 2019 represents the year. So here we are back at the server. I'm going to go ahead and run this first query and it will show us the current date is August 25th, 2020. And then I'll run this second query and it converts that date to a MySQL date format, which is year, 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 month, month, day, day. If you're interested in additional date functions, you can click the info link in the top right corner to learn more about them. So now I want you to try this learning activity. So try each of these 9 queries, pause this video, and then come back to compare your answers. All right, welcome back. So what I've done here is I've copied all those queries over, and now we'll go ahead and address them. So this first one asks us to show the average price of all products. So we select the average price from the product table. And I run this, and we see that the average price of all of our products is $534. The next question asks us to show the price of the most expensive product. So I'm going to select max price from the product table. So I'll go ahead and run this, and we can see the max price, the most expensive product, is $1,650. All right, so the next thing that we're asked is to show the lowercase name for all territories. So let's come back to our ERD and look for the territory table. We see the territory is right here, and the field that I'm looking for is the name field. So we will go ahead and select the lower name from territory. And you can see all these territories are now in lowercase characters. All right, this next query asks us to show the first 5 digits of each zip code for each customer. So in order to do this, I'm going to use what is called the mid function. So we're going to first select the name of the customer, and we're going to use mid, and we're going to look at the zip code for the 1st through the 5th characters. And this comes from the customer table. So we'll run this, and we can see that we have only the first 5 characters of each of the zip codes of our customers. All right, this next question asks us to show the price per foot for all all raw materials rounded to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to select the price per foot. So we do price divided by width from the raw material table, and we are asked to round this to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to put round in front of price divided by width, and then we'll put a comma, and then we're going to use 2, which represents that we're going to round it to 2 decimal characters. So I'll go ahead and run this, and we can see that all of the prices have been rounded to at most 2 decimal characters. All right, this next query asks us to show current time, so we say select cur time from dual, or I could just say select cur time, and this gives me the actual time right now, so I can keep running this and it will keep changing. This next query asks us to show the number of years each employee has worked for the company. So in order to do this, I'm going to select the first name and last name of each employee, and then I want to get the number of years. So to get the number of years, I need to get the difference in the dates between the current date and the date that the employee started working. So what I'm going to do is use what is called the date diff function, and I'm going to look at the difference between the current date and the date hired, and this comes from the employee table. So this is showing me the date difference in the total number of days. So what I'm going to do is divide this by 365, and that will give me the number of years. However, I want just whole years, so I'm going to use the round function, and I'm going to put a comma and round to 0 decimal places. So we'll go ahead and run this, and we can see approximately how much each of these employees have worked in years. This next query asks us to show the date 31 days from now. So we're going to select, and there is a date add function, and we're going to use the cur date, and we're going to add 31 days. And in order to add days to the current date, I'm going to use what is called interval, and we're going to add 31 days. So we say 31 day. And since this is going to come from the system rather than from a table, I'm going to go ahead and run it. And we can see that 31 days from now is September 25th, 2020. This last query asks us to show the order ID date and fulfillment date for orders that took longer than 10 weeks to fulfill. So what I'm going to do is select the order ID, the order date, and the fulfillment date from the order table. Remember that order is the reserved keyword, so we need to put that in tick marks. And then I'm only interested in those that have been fulfilled, so we need to filter out those that haven't. So we'll say where fulfillment date is not null. And then I want the difference between the fulfillment date and the order date. So I'm going to use and date diff between the fulfillment date and the order date is greater than 10 weeks. However, the problem here is this is going to return days, and I'm comparing it against weeks. So in order to convert days to weeks, I'm going to divide this number by 7. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and put it in my select clause so that I can actually see what this difference is as well. We'll give this an alias of time in weeks. So I'll go ahead and run this query, and we can see that 2 orders had the time in weeks greater than 10 weeks for fulfillment.